Right, for more reaction on that, we are now joined by Vuyolwethu Zungula of ATM. Dr. Zungula, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. According to the President, the motion to refer this report to the impeachment committee was rejected, so no impeachment committee, therefore no legal consequence. At this particular point, if that decision stands, there's no reason to challenge this in court. What's your reaction?
Look, Thabo, what South Africans need to know that they've got a president that is clearly a liar, who is misleads his own party so that the party does not vote in support or vote for the National Assembly to scrutinize his actions. And then later on, he says he's not going to challenge that report. What is very clear, you'll recall that Minister Lamola, when he was debating on that particular day, he said, we cannot, as the National Assembly, accept that report pending legal scrutiny. In other words, it meant that because the report has been taken on review, or there's a judicial process to review that report, it would be unwise for Parliament for the National Assembly to actually consider that report. Meaning what informed the basis of the ANC's argument was the fact that that report was taken on judicial review. Now that they somewhat seem to have escaped that parliament process, they want now to say the entire report is now moot and there's nothing that is going to happen with it. Whereas we want to inform South Africans that, number one, we have approached the Supreme Court of Appeal to seek to appeal the decision of the Western Cape High Court, because we are of the view as the ATM that the decision that was taken by the National Assembly not to scrutinize the report or the actions of the President via an inquiry, that decision was invalid, or that decision was inconsistent with the Constitution.
Right.
So we want, in fact, we're in court currently to have that the entire proceedings of the 13th of December to be reviewed and set aside. So this matter is far from over.
So you will be challenging 214 MPs who voted no versus the 148 who voted yes and the 2 who abstained.
Look, what you are there in the courts to do, number one, is to say the proceedings of the 13th of December were invalid and set aside on 2 reasons. The first one is the issue of the secret ballot matter, where we are arguing that the environment was toxic, and the test that should have been applied by the Speaker in order to determine the best method of voting should have been what will engender accountability, and the Speaker did not apply that test. That is the first issue. The second issue, Section 42(3) of the Constitution directs or mandates the National Assembly to oversee, to scrutinize executive action. Now, Parliament or the National Assembly appointed an independent panel, and they were given a task to ascertain whether there is a prima facie evidence that Mr. Ramaphosa may have committed wrongdoing. That independent panel comes back and says, indeed, there might have been wrongdoing. Now, a logical step or rational step and a constitutional step that should have been taken by the National Assembly was to have an inquiry in order to test that prima facie evidence, if indeed it is true or not. Now, what the National Assembly did on the 13th of December, they acted in a manner that is inconsistent with their mandate, their constitutional mandate. So we want, as the ATM, we want the courts to declare the actions or the decision or the resolution of the National Assembly on the 13th of December to be invalid and to be set aside, because currently that report of the independent panel, it is binding and it is valid, and there is no way in which we can let it go, because you can't have a report by a reputable Chief Justice that is stating that a head of state may have committed serious acts of misconduct and violated the Constitution.
So you're going to be arguing that the open ballot is not a default position, because essentially that's what the Speaker has said her view is.
Indeed, because on her view that everything must be done in a manner, in an open and transparent manner, That is her view, because she views the open ballot as a default position. Whereas the true test that should be applied is what will bring about, what is the best mechanism to ensure that there is accountability and members of parliament will be able to exercise their constitutional duty free from threats, free from harm. And you'll recall that on the day 2 members of the opposition received death threats. Members from the ruling party had threats to their livelihoods. Therefore, the environment was toxic. The environment was threatening to the lives and the livelihoods of the members of parliament. Therefore, it cannot be that now the best way an open ballot is used, whereas people have been threatened in that manner. But in our view.
Sorry, let me just come in. They can argue that there are members of the ANC who voted against and no harm befell them.
Look, we do not know the ANC processes. You'll recall that immediately after, some of those ANC members, they did receive letters detailing how they are going to be disciplined. Therefore, that on its own is a clear indication. And whether at a later stage, Thabo, members get to be disciplined or not disciplined, that is not an issue per se. The big issue is that, is there a threat by the time members are supposed to be voting? Is there a threat? Because we can't be saying we're going to examine or see if there's consequences after the actions have been taken. What the Speaker should have done was to say, in light of this environment, what is the best method to ensure that the executive does account, given the fact that there have been threats to the livelihoods of the members of parliament? And in our view, the Speaker did not apply, she was not acting in a rational manner by wanting members to vote in an open method, whereas there were threats to their livelihoods.
So her reliance on Section 59, subsection 1B of the Constitution, you're saying it's a wrong interpretation of that article?
No, we're not saying it is a wrong interpretation. You'll recall that in the previous terms, the issue of the secret ballot or the method of voting in parliament was before the courts. And one of the most important mechanisms, or one of the most important statements that came out of those court proceedings, was the issue of number 1, members of parliament, they take an oath to be loyal and faithful to the Constitution and to the people of South Africa. Secondly, there must be mechanisms to protect members of parliament should there be any threats when they are exercising their duties to the country. Now, that is why there was also that discussion whether there is a toxic environment. Now, it is very clear that the levels of the toxic environment that we saw in December last year would warrant that the method of voting must be in a manner that will protect members from any form of victimization.
So where you're sitting right now, if this process were to be rerun in a secret ballot, you believe that it would bring a different outcome?
Definitely. There's no self-respecting member of parliament who wants to live in an ethically governed country, who wants to have a president that is, that is beyond reproach, that would vote to protect a president. Because that is what is currently happening here. Because look, the former Chief Justice Nobo, their report is very clear about the gravity of the findings, that a president may have seriously violated the Constitution, Section 34 of Practa, serious acts of misconduct. There is no self-respecting member of parliament who wants South Africa to function, who would vote, because what was going to happen that, and I want to repeat this, that was not a vote to impeach the president. It was a vote to set up an inquiry that would investigate if indeed there is a case to answer, or in fact, if indeed the president has done wrongdoing or has not done wrongdoing. Now, you can't have members of parliament that will vote for a person not to be investigated or vote for inquiry not to be had, because that is what we're voting for that day. We're voting so that an inquiry is able to sit and scrutinize. So what those members of the ANC were doing, they were threatened that they need to vote to protect any to protect their president from scrutiny. So in other words, in the view of the ANC, their presidents are above scrutiny, they are above the constitution, they are above being held accountable. And that is not correct in the spirit of the constitution.
Yeah. In the spirit of the constitution, are you not crying foul over an outcome of a vote?
No. Look, Thabo. Yes, the ANC has the majority in parliament. There's no doubt about that. However, the ANC and in fact all members of parliament, in fact the National Assembly must conduct itself in a manner that is consistent with the constitution. It can't be that we are going to have a parliament that will take resolutions that are inconsistent with the constitution. And this is not the first time this issue is happening. You'll recall that a few years ago, there was the Secure in Comfort report by Ms. Thulima Donsela. And Parliament or the National Assembly took a resolution to absolve the then President Zuma on that particular issue, the Nkandla issue. When the courts were approached, the courts affirmed that Parliament must operate in a manner that is consistent with the Constitution. So that is the same principle here, because there's a report, a binding report, a valid report that is saying there's a case to answer. Parliament, a rational parliament, a logical parliament would have said, let us further investigate, not take a decision that is in violation of Section 42.3 of the Constitution, because Section 42.3 of the Constitution mandates the National Assembly to oversee, to scrutinize the actions of the executive. As we sit here now, Parliament has done nothing to scrutinize whether Mr. Ramaphosa did or did not commit any wrongdoing in light of Phala Phala.
Mr. Zungula, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. That is the African Transformation Movement leader, Vuyolwethu Zungula.